The helicopter blades spun, and we were up in the air. I was sitting beside Mia, with the area that leads to the cockpit open between us. And Barry was obviously in the pilot seat because, well, he was the pilot, so I hope he was in that seat. And Chris was riding shotgun, and I was sitting behind Barry, and Mia was sitting behind Chris, although I definitely wish that we had switched, but okay. And on the sides of us, on the door gunners, our door gunners were the twins, Jake and Dylan, and in the back, it was the medic and Boris. And then, so, I decided to make some conversation with Mia while we were on the way to this little Othman farm up in the mountains of Iraq. I asked, Mia, you know, Mia, Rose sure has missed her mommy. You gonna be excited to see her? And she said, you know what? Yes, I am. When she was born, I was really happy to be with her, but I don't know, after she turned like a week or two old, I just didn't want to be with her as much as I used to, and I just wanted to just constantly be away from her. And it got even worse when she got back from that crazy cult in Germany. Even warmer. Oh. And I just lost a lot of motivation to do things while I was in the house. And I said, oh, well, Mia, have you ever thought about talking to a therapist about this? And she said, you know what? Now that you mention it, no, I actually haven't. And I said, oh, well, Stars, they do have a therapist. Yeah, back at headquarters, they do. In fact, you get like 10 or 12 sessions free with the therapist. And she says, oh, well, I'll have to use it. And I was thinking, yeah, hey, maybe we could use it together, for couples therapy. And she just looked at me and said, I don't know, Ethan. Well, we'll see. And then, in the back, I could hear Jake starting to sing this. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Clean shirt, new shoes. I don't know what I am going to do. And Boris said, yeah, man, that ZZ Top, man. Yeah, rest in peace, Dusty Hill, man. Yeah. And, well, Boris, he thought he was a comedian, so he kind of tries to, make it funny on board the helicopter while we were on the way over in what is essentially a new glorified Huey from the Vietnam movies. He said, yo, Corman, yo mama is so nasty. When I called her for phone sex, she gave me an ear infection. And Corman just looked at Boris, straight his face, and said, my mom's dead. And Boris said, oh, bullshit. How come everybody on this damn helicopter's parents are dead? Like, you two twins, your parents are dead. And, Mia, are your parents still alive? No? What? Chris! But Chris couldn't hear him. And he said, what was your name again? Ethan. Yeah, Ethan, are your parents still alive? And I said, well, my dad died 3 years ago, and my stepdad died last year, but my mother's still alive. See? Both my parents are still alive. They're in They live in Inagua, where I'm from. And then Jake looked over at Boris and said, "Oh no, when we go back to Ethalonia, are you not going to be with us?" And Boris said, "No, I don't think so. After this, I'm going to see my family back in Inagua." And Jake just said, "All right, we'll miss you." And Dylan said, You will." Boris laughed. And then, very soon later, we were right in the middle of the mountains, landing on some sandy, dusty soil in front of a little white, Arabic-looking farmhouse. And it had a shed and what appeared to be a little barn, and also had a chicken coop. And then Barry waved us off and flied away. And then Mia already got to orders. "All right, okay, Ethan, Dylan. All right, Ethan, what I need you to do is I need you to get the satellites overhead and scan them one more time now that we're here. And you, Dylan, use your radars and then scan the underground, because we do have reason to believe, thanks to Ethan, that there is a significant amount of underground activity under us. So turn on your sonars, just like and Mia stopped, and Dylan said, "Submarine, Mom, just like a submarine, Aunt Mia." Yeah, Dark Knight. And Mia said, "Okay, so I know some Arabic, so we are going to go in, and then we are going to interrogate this Salim Othman." And then after that, we saw a small looking man who was kind of hunched over, and he looked at us and then ran, and he had a turban on, he had a beard, and we were like, "Okay, we got to find him." And so Mia, Chris, and Boris bust down the door, and then a shovel comes flying right towards Boris' head, but he avoids it. He blocks it with his rifle and then points it right at the same man who was running. And Mia says, "That's Mufasa, not Salim." And then Mia said in Arabic, hold on, my Arabic's not that good. "Tayala huna, Salim." And then a skinny but semi-tall man came out, and he had light brown skin, and he was wearing a white robe, one of those Muslim robes, and he had one of those white caps that Muslims wear, and he had a real thin beard. It wasn't very long, it was just real thin. And he says, and then Mia came over to him, interrogating him, and she screamed at him. She screamed, "Ikatba," which basically means, "What are you hiding?" in Arabic. And then he started to cry. He didn't really cry. He started to tear up a little bit and said, English? And she said, "Yes, English." You got me." And then he led both Chris and Mia back to his room, and he opened some kind of cupboard and said, Look. And Mia bent over excitedly and then pulled out some big bags of white powder. Oh, okay. So Salim, he's a bit of a crook, but not the kind of crook we're looking for. And then Salim begged, please, I
I'm just doing this to make some extra money for my family. My family lives in the city. Please, I'll stop after this. And I grow more than just cocaine and marijuana. I also grow tomatoes, peppers, corn. Yeah.
And Mia just tried to hush him up, saying, okay, we're not looking for that. Meanwhile, Jake was doing a perimeter check of this whole little farm. And me and Dylan were just doing I was making sure satellites were overhead, looking at us live, and I was also making sure that our coordinates were live, and stars always knew where to find us. And then I got a concerned vibe from Dylan, and he said, Ethan, look, there appears to be some strange underground activity going on. Like, it's almost as if it's moving. There's a lot of things moving underground, and according to my sonar, it looks like there are these figures moving like bogies, and like what, some kind of substance, and then it started to shake. And then I heard a loud cracking sound. And then and then the ground started to shake some more, and then I realized, oh no, now I remember what happened to that old temple that this was built on. We gotta go, earthquake, we gotta get out of here. And then, so, Mia grabbed Celine by the hand, and Boris cried out, wait, why do we have to bring these guys with us? And so Boris pointed the gun at him and pointed Mufasa away, and then the ground shook some more, and it made this horrible grinding sound. And then I heard this loud cracking sound, and then I felt the ground just drop out from under me, and next thing I know, I was falling, and then oh! I had hit my back on a rock. And I was in a dark place looking up at the afternoon sky. It didn't take a detective to find out that there was an earthquake and a sinkhole opened up and I had fallen in. And what's even worse is I had to find Mia, the twins, and the rest of the squad and figure out a way to get out of here. Great. Okay, let's find out. So, I called on my little radio. Guys, you okay? Over. Locations, over. And then I heard Dylan in his, he wasn't making very masculine noises, but it was fine. I was just happy to hear him. Ethan! And so I ran to help him, and I thank God that he was only under what appeared to be a part of a roof that was on top of him but was not crushing him. So I helped him up, and he was thankful for that, and we hugged for a little bit. But then we decided, okay, all right, now we got to find your brother and your aunt or mother, whatever you want to call her, my wife, okay? We got to find those two. So we started walking around, and we were walking around in what appeared to be a cave, but the ground, it didn't look like any cave that I had ever seen. The ground looked very, like, smooth and, like, almost like tiles. And then I looked straight ahead, and I had to use the flashlight that most STARS agents have, and then I looked, and I saw what appeared to be a little cubed building. And I thought, wait a minute, we're not on top of a cave system, we're on top of a ziggurat. One of the ancient ziggurats that sunk into the mountains. Okay, alright, we gotta find everybody else. Now, meanwhile, Mia had fallen, and she was right next to Salim, and then Chris had also fallen, but he wasn't so lucky. He fell, and his face had hit a rock, and a larger rock hit him in the back of the head. Yeah, Mia was just devastated over that. And, okay, Chris, he was a good guy. And, well, the way he lectured me about leaving our baby behind, I mean, I don't think he was doing anything sexual with my wife, so I do think he was a good guy. But, now that it's been 5 years since his death, I have a little bit less competition. But, in all seriousness, Chris, you really were a good STARS agent, okay? Alright. And when Mia fell, while next to Chris, she saw and she cried for a little bit. And Salim, because he was under the impression that he was under arrest, even though... yeah, I don't think arresting him for, like, growing some cocaine was our priority. And it's kind of weird how he didn't know that. But then again, we had come in basically storming his property, looking like that, like storming in, looking like we were looking for Bin Laden. So, makes sense. So he ran away. And then Boris and Mufasa were also right beside each other, and they fell in a hole together. And then Mufasa immediately pounced on Boris. This is all coming from Boris, so I don't know how much of it is true. Boris likely, exaggerated it to make himself look sexy and masculine, but it's what he said. He pounced on him, and then, but Boris was able to push him off, and then he quickly ran for the rifle, and Mufasa ran for him, and then he grabbed the rifle, pointed at him. Mufasa stopped, and then pow! Boris pulled the trigger, and it was like that scene from The Lion King. Jake, he had fallen separate from the group, and we still hadn't known where the corpsman was, although he was also very close by to Jake. But Jake hadn't seen the corpsman yet, so he got up, and he realized he was all alone. And he was on top of this ziggurat that had sunken into the mountain, and the hole that had formed a big skylight was kind of his only sense of light, besides a little flashlight he had. So he took his rifle and, like a true STARS agent, turned on his flashlight and put it on his shirt pocket and started patrolling. And then his radio had been unfortunately broken, so he couldn't call anybody. And then he heard a rustling sound, like someone was walking rather quickly. And then he pointed the gun, and behind a rock emerged Salim. And then Salim said, "Oh wait, put your weapon, I mean you no harm." And Jacob was taken aback by it and said, "Wait a minute. Was that a Star Wars reference?" And Salim said, Yes, I think it was. I'm unarmed. My farm just collapsed onto this ziggurat of Ishtar today. So, I'm just trying to get back to my family. I'm Salim Othman. And you are? Jacob was hesitant, but he said, I'm Jake. Jake Parker. Jake. Okay, Jake, I think maybe we could form some kind of an alliance, and we can get out of here. And Jake said, "How do I know I can trust you?" And Salim said, "Because it seems to me that we are in the same situation." And Jake said, "All right."